I'm not sure how the panelists can hear the questions in the audience. Can you give me a nod if you can? Okay, great. I think that the first hand I saw up was Professor Scotford. Why don't you take it for us?
I got the gist of the question, which was the impact of the war in Ukraine on energy transition.
That's right.
And that's had a particular impact on the EU. So that's why it's the reason. Well, there's two reasons why the EU has been slow responding to the call in Glasgow to strengthen its ambition. One is that it takes a little while for the machinery of the EU, and yes, as Professor Lynn said, it's kind of like it's quite a sophisticated political institution, but it takes quite a while for the machinery to update and increase ambition in the kind of measures that it has to set higher targets across a whole range of sectors. So that was a bit of delay. But the problem that has happened more immediately is that many member states in the EU have had to find alternate energy sources, including reverting to coal. So that has been a regression. But the very latest information is that actually that has been a short-term blip, and then the flip to renewable energy and investment in it is also happening very quickly in EU member states. So it will be interesting to see, I think, over probably the next 12 months, 2 years, to see how much the EU gets back on track with its decarbonisation through energy. There's been a backward step, but then very quickly a forward step as a reaction to war in Ukraine about energy sources. And also there has been considerable improvement on energy efficiency, so reducing energy demand in response to the war. So it's been an interesting kind of, it's been a really terrible international event, but the impact on energy transition has been complex. And I think it shows that when you have these pathways to 2050, there will be events that knock things off course or that are unpredictable, and policy needs to adjust, and that the perfect policy pathway is going to have to be responsive to events as well. But I think that's where we are right now, regression, but then actually a bit of a positive move on energy demand and energy sources very, very recently.
That's really interesting to hear. Thank you. And I think we'll appreciate hearing a bit of a possible good news there as well. Would any of the other panelists like to respond?
Sure. I'll just say that in the United States, the principal effect has been to increase the interest in export of liquefied natural gas. And so several LNG terminals are under construction. The hydraulic fracturing technology has allowed the production of a large quantity of natural gas, and it highlights the debate about the role that natural gas has in the future. Natural gas is much cleaner than coal, but it's still a fossil fuel with tremendous emissions. And so there's been a big debate in the U.S. about the future of natural gas, but the Ukraine crisis has encouraged the production of U.S. Natural gas and the export of LNG. And I think on a net basis, that's a negative effect in the U.S. because we really need to be transitioning away not only from coal, but from natural gas, and to rely much more heavily on renewables. The challenge is increased by the fact that an additional essential element of deep decarbonization is transitioning motor vehicles from fossil fuels to electricity, and also to transform a lot of building heating and cooling from fossil fuels, from oil and gas to electricity. All of that about doubles the demand for electricity. And so if we want to greatly reduce the use of fossil fuels, particularly gas to generate electricity, and double the demand for it, it just adds to the enormous volume of wind and solar that we need. And that's a challenge, but it's also a tremendous economic opportunity.
Can I just add one quick point?
Please, yeah.
Professor Girardi is absolutely right. One of the downsides on the quick move to look for energy security in Europe has been, one, a reversion to coal, but also tying into gas contracts from other parts of the world. And that is a medium-term problem because those contracts are in place. There is a chance they may become stranded assets, I think, but that's a problem for the energy transition, unfortunately.
Thank you. Yeah, I think huge challenges as well as hopefully opportunities for forward motion here. And Dr. Martinez or Professor Lin, would you like to add anything? If not, we'll take another question.
I'm happy to take another question because in Singapore, for example, there was this huge. I mean, we are LNG reliant, and so there hasn't been a big shock in terms of energy prices in Singapore and in other parts of the region which are heavily reliant on LNG and coal. Yeah, but I think the wider trends, however, have of course had ramifications for this region.
Thank you. Thank you. And Dr. Martinez, I'll give you a chance to respond if you'd like.
Oh, in Peru, practically all the cars and are moved by petrol or gas. Now there is a movement from the government trying to introduce the natural gas. It's only in its first steps, but I think it's promising. No, this first steps in introducing natural gas, because it's very economic and people is trying to pass to that. But we have hydraulic energy because of the rivers. Then the country doesn't use a lot of fossil fuel energy for electricity production, but it's menaced by the problem of the glacier retreat also. Then I think in the future we will be forced also to develop alternative energies also. But now we are in our first steps. And anyway, Peru is not a great contributor to this kind of pollution or greenhouse gases. But anyway, I think we should emphasize this transition to natural gas for the vehicles.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. And with that, I'm sure there are more questions in the audience. Perhaps we can all be in touch virtually or by email as time goes on. But we have reached the end of the final session of the Paro Forum. So thank you again so much to the organizers. Thank you to all of our panelists. It's been a really, really rich conversation, and we're really grateful for your time. And thank you for joining us from all around the world this morning, afternoon, or evening. Thanks so much.
Thank you.